Kathy, we still have people joining,
Well,
still coming into the room, but
and it's 3 after. I think probably we could go ahead and get started with the welcome and then, because I know people, we don't want to run over the time.
all right, I'm going to
What
bring
do you
you.
all think, Bonnie, Tina, Carol?
Yeah, I think we're
Close
we're
enough for the time?
yeah,
Okay.
4 minutes, almost 4 minutes after. I think we're good.
All righty. Okay. That's good. So, welcome everyone to our panel discussion on continuing education for Christian Science nurses. I'm Kathy Glover, Director of Christian Science Nursing at the Benevolent Association. I'll be your host for today. Our panelists are Tina Bildhorn, Director, 10 Acre School of Christian Science Nursing, Bonnie Casterman, Manager, Department of Christian Science Nursing Activities at First Church of Christ Scientists, Boston, and Carol Worley, Director of Christian Science Nurses Training at the Benevolent Association. At the end of our presentation, there should be time for our panelists to answer some questions you may have. If you would please write your questions to the panelists in the chat section of Zoom. The chat button is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. To start us off, Tina has some short readings.
Thank you, Kathy. First from the Bible, Ephesians. I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that ye walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. And from First Church of Christ Scientist and Miscellany by Mary Baker Eddy. The entire purpose of true education is to make one not only know the truth, but live it, to make one enjoy doing right, make one not work in the sunshine and run away in the storm, but work midst clouds of wrong, injustice, envy, hate, and wait on God, the strong deliverer, who will reward righteousness and punish iniquity. As thy days, so shall thy strength be.
Thank you, Tina. Let's start by talking about the purpose and value of continuing education. In your current role, Bonnie, how do you see it?
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Tina, for those wonderful readings to start us off. In considering the purpose and value of continuing education for Christian Science nurses, we really need to begin at the beginning. We all recognize that the standard in the church manual bylaw describes an active practice that needs to be maintained because its purpose is to fulfill the expectation that Mrs. Eddy described for each of the bylaws in the front piece of the manual as a help that must be supplied to maintain the dignity and defense of our cause. There is no question that a current and correct practice of Christian Science nursing is what is required to fulfill this important intent. It became evident to me in my position at the Mother Church when interviewing Christian Science nurses, both those applying to advertise for the first time and those wanting to be relisted in the journal after being out for a few years. And also from updates that I receive regularly about current laws and best practices, that all Christian Science nurses need a way to stay up to date on important issues relating to their practice. Unfortunately, also from the relatively few complaints that I do receive from the field, it also became evident that some kind of regular review of ethical considerations and business practices as independent contractors is necessary. The publication of one's name in our periodicals is a confirmation that an individual represents the high standard of Christian Science nursing established in the bylaw. This is a reflection of our church's standard of care. You know, Mrs. Eddy expected the Christian Science Board of Directors, in relation to our periodicals, to see that they are ably edited and kept abreast of the times. To me, this includes that the individuals who are listed in the Journal and Herald represent this same standard. Because of my experience of being an instructor in training schools for many years, I gained an appreciation for the importance of education in maintaining a current knowledge of best practices, legal requirements, and ethics for both for those working in facilities and for one's own individual practice. Obviously, anyone who was trained 20 or 30 years ago, practicing on their own in the field and not temping in facilities, may not have had the opportunity to refresh their skills or to engage in workshops where ethical issues are reviewed or new equipment and supplies are discussed. And although there have been some wonderful refresher courses offered by training programs at times over the years, and there are regularly required workshops that take place in the facilities as part of Medicare regulations for Rinke facilities or as a licensing requirement for some, and sharing information and workshops at the international conference that the Christian Science Nursing Network hosts every 2 years. These have not been regular or consistent or even designed to meet the mutually determined standard that has been developed by the training programs. So I'm grateful that as the field has become more aware of the need and how important this activity is, new ways of providing opportunities have begun to open up recently.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. Carol, as a member of the AOCSN Education Committee, as well as an instructor, would you share some thoughts about this as well?
Thank you, Kathy. It's good to be with all of you today. I'm sure we all want to be giving prayerful attention to the things that Bonnie brought out and to work together in support of meeting the standard and purpose of this wonderful church manual bylaw, so that all those calling on this bylaw in time of need can be assured they will receive a clear representation of it. What's so important to understand, as I know we do, is that our education for the ministry of Christian Science nursing, as with any area of Christian Science practice, is found in studying with our pastor, the Bible, and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, our textbooks for instruction in Christian Science, and we have our church manual. These are our perpetual guide to a sound ministry that naturally continues to rise higher. We have this wonderful revelation of divine science for the spiritual vision, the ethics, the wisdom, the spiritual qualities that impel a scientific, skilled practice of Christian Science nursing. And we need this prayer and study of Christian Science even to gain a true understanding of the requirements that Mrs. Eddy has set forth in this bylaw. Working closely with the teachings of the Comforter, Divine Science, we learn of the expression of the Comforter that is seen in Christian Science nursing. This is where we receive our education, where we find our example and counsel for this work. But of course, all of this must be brought out. This bylaw calls for a demonstrated practice, a constant demonstrated readiness, and what a support having an avenue provided for this purpose can be for Christian Science nurses, both foundationally and as one is continuing forward in this important work for our cause. Of course, avenues for Christian Science nurses training and education can't substitute for our study and prayer in Christian Science, but they can go hand in hand with it. As a member of the Mother Church, representing myself as a Christian Science nurse for a number of years now, I know the blessing that Christian Science nurses training was for me as I was beginning to secure a ministry in this holy work. I loved that there was a provision and a demand for proving a readiness to represent myself. an avenue for bringing out and securing for my representation and practice the truths that I was learning about this ministry through my individual study of Christian Science. I've always thought of this provision of Christian Science nurses training as evidence of divine minds shepherding care, both for members coming forward in representing this church manual bylaw and for all those calling on this church ministry in time of need. As you brought out, Bonnie, the bylaw describes an active practice. So it's a standard not only to attain at the outset, but to maintain. We see how this bylaw always speaks to the present. We find within it a perpetual requirement and responsibility to rise in meeting this standard for each call, each case, in every instance of this ministry, always prepared to meet the requirements given by our leader, ready to bear witness to healing in this unique role of Christian Science nurse. Though it's certainly not necessary to perpetually remain in a training program, there is a call for continued growth, refinement, strengthening to meet this demand to be able to bring out what is required for a right practice in the individual circumstance. This spiritual growth in the practice of Christian Science nursing, of course, is natural as we work closely with the teachings of Christian Science. And we also find that needed resources, including instances of right mentoring, shepherding, and instruction, come into our experience as a result of our study and prayer. I've been so grateful for examples of this along the way that have supported me in my growth in the practice of Christian Science nursing and in meeting the individual commitment as a member to stay true to the standard of this bylaw. Mentoring and instruction that I received from others provided significant support to me as my practice was expanding to embrace new areas of work. And as I was being called to meet greater demands. These resources have been a strong support to me for being prepared to work through complexities of changing needs, changing laws and regulations, changing and challenging circumstances. A great help to me toward demonstrating a sound ethical practice, a law-abiding practice, a spiritually grounded practice, for providing a safe, practical, and loving ministry to those in need of healing and proper care. The very things we learn from instruction that we're given in the Christian Science textbooks that describe what Christian Science nursing is and should be. How important this preparedness is, not only to being a strong witness to healing, but to ensure that our practice of Christian Science nursing serves as a help supplied to maintain the dignity and defense of our cause. It's quite natural to help one another in this work. We see this brought out throughout the Bible with so many mentoring relationships and clear examples of supporting one another in working for God, working together in serving the cause. Christian Science nursing is not just an individual ministry for those members who represent themselves as a Christian Science nurse. It is a church ministry. So there's an individual responsibility and a collective responsibility to bring out a church ministry reflective of this wonderful bylaw and the teachings of Christian Science.
Thank you, Carol and Bonnie. You both have so beautifully shared how love is the basis for all we're talking about today. Before we move on, let's take a few minutes to specifically acknowledge the spiritual foundation of love that supports and provides the context for continuing education. I've been seeing that fundamentally, the love for the bylaw and for our leader that you all brought out has its foundation in the two great commandments: loving God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. As we know, this love for God and our neighbor comes out from the nature of God as divine love and is the very source of our being. created in love's image and likeness. It finds expression in our innate, heartfelt inclination to be true to the purity of that love, which naturally includes receptivity to pure spiritual ideas. And those pure ideas inevitably lead to the desire to be true to the highest standards in our Christian Science nursing ministries, which are expressions of love for God and our neighbor. It's love reflected in love, isn't it? The commitment to love articulated in these two great commandments is seen in every aspect of continuing education. It's expressed by those offering the classes and by those participating in them, as well as by and toward those who are so lovingly ministered to by the Christian Science nurse. Those involved with Christian Science nurses training and education programs are motivated by love to continue supporting the Christian Science nurses who complete those programs. It's consistent with Mrs. Eddy's directive in the chapter Teaching Christian Science in our textbook, where we read, "Do not dismiss students at the close of a class term feeling that you have no more to do for them." Likewise, for those teaching Christian Science nursing. Loving God and our neighbor naturally keeps Christian Science nurses alert and receptive, dedicated to actively maintaining the standards articulated in each element of the bylaw, amid changing landscapes, as you mentioned, Carol. Another foundational spiritual idea is that as a bylaw in our church manual, the role of the Christian Science nurse is part of the structure of our church, inseparably connected to and actively expressed within its mission and purpose. The bylaw requires Christian Science nurses to be members of the Mother Church. I love that. I love the commitment as well as the support that being a member of the church includes. This means that the ministry of the Christian Science nurse is consistent with the entire manual and with our theology, according to the teachings of the Bible and Mrs. Eddy's writings, as you shared, Carol. As we know, the mission of our church is healing. Our theology is based on the life and teachings of Jesus, who lived and demonstrated the healing activity of the Christ. Mrs. Eddy clearly articulates this in the historical sketch at the beginning of our church manual, where we read, "The First Church of Christ Scientist in Boston, Massachusetts, is designed to be built on the rock, Christ. Even the understanding and demonstration of divine truth, life, and love, healing and saving the world from sin and death. Thus, to reflect in some degree the church universal and triumphant." So, as members of the Mother Church, Christian Science nurses contribute to that healing mission. Their active, Christ-like love for God and their fellow man expresses the true sense of nursing, the nurturing, nourishing, cherishing love that clearly sees the nature of God as divine love and man as love's perfect idea. And we know from our textbook that this clear view, beholding in science the perfect man as Christ Jesus did, heals. Keeping that clear sense clear, fresh and uplifted is an important part of each Christian Science nurse's contribution to the healing mission of our church, and an important aspect of why continuing education is so important.
Thank you, Tina, and all three of you for setting a foundation for us. An important aspect to consider is the history of continuing education in Christian Science nursing. Carol, you've played an active role in this over the years. Could you share a bit about what you've seen taking place?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Tina. As with all things that come forth as a result of prayer in responding to a need, there is unfoldment. The things we've been talking about on this panel have impelled offering a variety of classes, workshops, and mentoring to journalistic Christian Science nurses through the years, and with increasing consistency and availability over the past couple of decades. As you all were joining this meeting today, I was just recognizing so many of you that have been involved in what's been unfolding with continuing education through the years. Side-by-side mentoring among journalistic Christian Science nurses is probably the avenue of support that reaches back the farthest and has continued right through the years. And although it wasn't frequent, there were refresher classes offered from time to time when Christian Science nurses training was overseen by the Mother Church. And as Bonnie mentioned, in-service training has taken place through the years at Christian Science nursing organizations and services to support meeting the loving standard for representing this bylaw in the individual and collective ministry. This also goes back to before the Mother Church turned the responsibility of training over to the field. But it has become more prevalent and consistent in the past couple of decades. As Bonnie mentioned, international conferences for Christian Science nurses have included training workshops within the conference. But beyond in-service and conference workshops, we'll take a look at some of the fuller classes and courses. A number of Christian Science nurses through the years, beginning in the early 1990s, were responding individually to requests to teach courses for their fellow journalistic Christian Science nurses. This was quietly taking place in pockets around the field. From these requests, individual Christian Science nurses began designing and teaching courses. For instance, for those coming into the position of Director of Christian Science Nursing, or for visiting Christian Science nurses. Courses designed for those working on private duty cases. Courses addressing ethics and the art of Christian Science nursing in responding to child cases. Also, in the 1990s, there were camp directors seeing a need and requesting to have classes available to Christian Science nurses in support of bringing a sound practice of this ministry to the Christian Science camp communities. Workshops and mentoring for this purpose began to come forward, and fuller classes were developed and taught in response to this need early in 2000. And of course, mother and infant care classes have been taught by many throughout the field for many years to meet this need and to give support for this loved work. Christian Science nurses training schools began offering and teaching a variety of classes yearly for journalistic Christian Science nurses. And this has been going on consistently for a couple of decades now, focusing on a wide variety of topics requested from the Christian Science nursing field in support of this ministry. As well, courses for mentors and for instructors are taught on a regular basis to support those carrying out this work. Christian Science nurses have even found a benefit in coming back to take partial and full classes from the courses taught in the Christian Science nurses training programs. And of course, as mentioned first, there have been and continue to be many instances of side-by-side mentoring among journalistic Christian Science nurses in the refuge of facilities, in ministering in the home, at Principia, at the Christian Science camps, in visiting services, and on baby cases. There's something very special about coming together as Christian Science nurses with seasoned practices in this church ministry. There's such a joy and strength in working together, learning from one another, working with spiritual vision, new ideas and equipment and supplies that lend more grace to carrying out this ministry, learning new skills and refining skills, working with ethics and their application in various settings and circumstances, keeping abreast of laws, compliance, regulations, and keeping pace with maintaining current sound practices. Providing opportunities for continued support beyond an initial training program is not a new idea. There's already been a lot of work in this direction, a lot of individual pioneering, as well as many working together to develop, establish, and bring this forward. And it has accomplished much good with substantial fruits. Now we have the opportunity to respond to the request for an even greater collective focus in working together, continuing forward in this good purpose of meeting the standard given by our leader, all in support of healing and for the dignity and defense of our cause, all in the spirit of Mrs. Eddy's counsel from Science and Health. The talents he gives, we must improve.
Thank you, Carol. With this collective focus, Tina, can you share a bit about the current approach that many educators have been taking?
Yes, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Carol. As many with us today are aware, the Continuing Education Working Group came out of a philanthropy forum conference last year. And also at last year's AOCSN conference, the need for consistency in maintaining the standard of Christian Science nursing prompted continuing education to be seen as a priority going forward. As we've all been seeing more clearly over the past few years, collaboration, this collective focus that Carol mentioned, is helpful in accomplishing the priorities identified throughout the field. There's a saying that I love that expresses this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Maintaining high standards in Christian Science nursing is not a short, quick trip. It's a long-term commitment. So the collective focus, going together, is very helpful. As Carol shared, there have been various continuing education activities over the years, but they haven't been readily available to all journal-listed Christian Science nurses, and many Christian Science nurses have not been aware of them. The Continuing Education Working Group includes representatives from all 4 of the groups that are included in the Christian Science Nursing Collaborative, the AOCSN, the Christian Science Nursing Network, the Philanthropy Forum, and the Mother Church. Each connects us with a vital element of what is required to ensure that continuing education is and remains an active part of each Christian Science nurse's ministry. The AOCSN Education Committee has been a natural partner because the education and training programs provided by its member organizations are actively teaching the most current information in their programs. Providing continuing education then simply involves the addition of refresher classes or workshops to review aspects of what is being taught in those programs. Representatives from the Continuing Education Working Group first met with the AOCSN Education Committee members last fall. We spent the day discussing the importance of this idea and then prioritizing topics and methods. The instructors clearly saw and agreed with the importance of this initiative and enthusiastically committed to going forward together. Likewise, the Christian Science Nursing Network has been a natural and supportive partner as they connect us with individual Christian Science nurses for whom the refresher classes are being provided. The CSNN's stated mission and purpose includes a commitment to providing opportunities for communication, inspiration, and continuing education for Christian Science nurses. They helped us send out a survey early on to get input from Christian Science nurses about topics to cover in refresher classes and where to offer them. The CSNN is also serving as an information hub. There's a page on their website devoted to continuing education, providing information about upcoming offerings. As to the funding aspects, the Albert Baker Fund has long been dedicated to supporting Christian Science nursing education and training. They have been active participants in the Continuing Education Working Group from the outset, conscientiously exploring the areas where funding is needed, both for those providing and those participating in the classes and workshops. And Bonnie's participation as the manager of the Christian Science nursing activities for the Mother Church has been key as well. As she mentioned earlier, her position provides valuable insights into the topics needing to be addressed, and it is from a global vantage point. We're blessed to have her actively involved as ideas are unfolding and plans being implemented. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Bonnie, you started this discussion with how you see the need for continuing education. How do you see the current initiatives responding to this need?
Well, having a collaborative working group brings, as Tina just shared with us, a number of helpful resources together and individuals who are great supporters of this idea, bringing their individual strengths to support the activity. Having individuals from a funding organization, for instance, and others from the field who are not Christian Science nurses brings strength and perspective to the project. One of the benefits of having the AOCSN Education Committee focus on this project is because this group of instructors has been working for the last several years to consciously establish a unified approach and a mutually defined high standard in our basic training programs. This unified approach and collaboration is very important in supporting the efforts taking place in the developing continuing education opportunities. The instructors are uniquely qualified to develop programs that include topics and approaches that best support the experienced worker in the field. An important aspect of this type of instruction is to recognize that experienced Christian Science nurses don't need an introductory approach. Rather, it's more effective to think of it as building a bridge from their current understanding and experience to new ideas and ways of doing things. This approach will both confirm and strengthen their practice. This will also naturally identify if an adjustment is needed. So it's a natural way to acknowledge the gold and refine it further. In regular meetings with our working group over the last year, it also became clear that while we are still learning how to best present this material with a consistent standard and determine which topics are the most needed, it's been really helpful to provide a small team of fellow instructors from the different training schools as a resource to help refine the content and goals of each session, as well as to provide some feedback afterwards. Those providing the workshops have welcomed this support and found it to be very helpful. This is a wonderful shared effort that is moving forward to address an important need to support those who are demonstrating a manual bylaw with its vital purpose. There's no doubt that it is and will continue to bless the field. Even in its beginning stages, it has already helped many eager recipients. From the Mother Church's point of view, it's essential to support those representing the standard in our bylaw and what is required for being journalistic. Now that we are developing a more dependable approach to provide workshops and will be developing other ways of supporting continuing education for experienced Christian Science nurses, our department can expect and request all Christian Science nurses to regularly participate. The Christian Science Board of Directors and Trustees see this as a very positive step forward. They support this as a normal activity for those wanting to continue to advertise in the Christian Science Journal and Herald. One other area that we're working on is to encourage those who are not currently advertising in the journal, but representing themselves as Christian Science nurses, to take steps to ensure their practice reflects the high standard in the bylaw. An opportunity to collaborate has come up through the administration of the National Fund for Christian Science Nursing. The Principal Foundation and my office are working together to find ways to encourage those who are providing care to others and being paid through that fund to receive support and have access to instruction. One example of this during the past several months was the opportunity to hold several Zoom meetings to share information regarding the ethical considerations and community guidelines related to COVID-19, with both journalisted Christian Science nurses working independently and non-journalisted caregivers working with the National Fund. Some of the topics covered in the continuing education webinars offered by the training schools for those working in homes include a review of important ethical considerations. For example, the importance to clearly determine a patient's choice of care when deciding to accept a case in the field, which should include presenting a contract or statement of understanding to the patient and responsible family members with the Christian Science nurse scope of services, and knowing how to share this information with non-Christian scientists and public officials. As you can see, the progress of this collaborative group and the support it is providing for those who have been advertising in the journal for many years is very encouraging. I love a statement Mrs. Eddy wrote in First Church of Christ Scientist and Miscellany, which I think catches the spirit of this activity. We understand best that which begins in ourselves and by education brightens into birth. It is such a joy to be a part of this important activity and to work alongside fellow Christian Science nurses who are dedicated to the high standard of our ministry.
Thank you, Bonnie. Tina, can you share anything more about what has been taking place recently with continuing education?
Yes, thank you, Kathy, and thank you again, Bonnie. For obvious reasons, most of the continuing education activity this year has been online. That format is probably what is most new. There have been several meetings and webinars to review topics that lend themselves to the Zoom format. One approach that has been successful involves small group meetings to discuss an aspect of the ethics of Christian Science nursing. A certain topic is offered on several days at various times, and groups of journal-listed Christian Science nurses, usually no more than 10 per session, explore questions and share ideas, experiences, and inspiration. What's been particularly beneficial about the online formats is that they have a very wide reach. The webinars offered this year have gathered Christian Science nurses throughout the world. The number of participants has been over 100 in some sessions. The response from Christian Science nurses in facilities, as well as those ministering in the field, has been enthusiastic. Their feedback has been consistently positive and filled with gratitude. Some of the topics that have been covered over Zoom this year are HIPAA, ethics during sudden needs, accepting and withdrawing from cases, embracing the family, creating an environment conducive to healing, managing your ministry on the business aspects of Christian Science nursing, financial responsibilities of Christian Science nurses in their individual ministries, tax requirements, record keeping, and so forth, and a mother and infant care class that extended over several months. Looking ahead, we're expecting webinars and online classes to continue, even when the current guidelines for gathering in groups are lifted and in-person classes and workshops can be offered. I'd like to say, too, how beautifully this idea has unfolded, both within the AOCSN Education Committee and the Continuing Education Working Group, with the support of the Philanthropy Forum as well. It's been such a good example of how much we can accomplish when individuals and organizations come together out of their love for God and for one another and share that love more widely in ways that bless and support healing.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you all three for what you've shared with us so far. We would now like to take just a few minutes. It's about 1:15, so we have about 10 minutes or so to just answer some questions that you all have. I see that Alistair Budd from the UK has put in a couple of questions. If you all have some questions as you listen to the discussion, would like to put them in the chat. Maybe we'll start off with Alistair's first question, which is there a collaboration and communication between managers of the 4 Christian Science Nurses training centers regarding the provision of continuing education? I don't know if there's really, I know there used to be 4 CS nursing training centers, but anyway, I don't know if, I think there might be more than that right now. Are each of these centers currently providing continuing education for journalistic Christian Science nurses? Is that something maybe Tina would be able to answer, or Bonnie, or Tina, you want to start off?
Sure, I'll start. Perhaps the simple answer to that question is just with regard to the AOCSN Education Committee, where representatives from any program, any organization within the AOCSN that has a full education program is actively invited to be participating. Those individuals, the representatives from those programs, meet monthly and keep in touch about a lot of different ideas and opportunities related to Christian Science nursing education, both in the basic programs that they offer, and of course, as was mentioned earlier in our conversation, have been a very active partner with regard to the continuing education initiatives as well. So it's probably the way that representatives from those programs get together regularly to provide an opportunity to discuss ideas and look at ways that we can go forward cohesively and with common standards together.
Okay. The next question, thank you. The next question, I'm just going to keep going on. If you have more questions about that, Alistair, you can unmute yourself and ask it privately if you like. How will continuing education classes be advertised in order that Christian Science nurses worldwide will be aware of them? Will a website be designed specifically for this purpose? Bonnie, is that something you'd like to answer?
Well, I can give it a try here. I think Tina shared that that the Christian Science Nursing Network has a page devoted to advertising the continuing education courses. So I think the best thing to do would be to go on their website and keep it up in your bookmarks or something and check it regularly. And they also send out news and notices and announcements. So that is it's kind of illustrates how beautifully this collaborative effort has come together with these different resources that are handling different aspects of this so naturally. And CSNN has been a huge support to us, as Tina mentioned, also as Albert Baker has been in its support of education for Christian Science nurses. So I think we've got that one covered for sure. You just need to key into the Christian Science Nursing Network and keep track of those. That's the main place that we're advertising, unless the training schools and or organizations that are offering the courses have you on a list of emails that they regularly send information to. So those two ways, anybody from overseas should really just be able to check that those notices. And because it's Zoom, at the moment, so many of these programs are being offered in the Zoom format. It's made it easy for us to join together worldwide.
Great, thank you. And Suzanne Givens from Beacon Haven is asking, can you tell us what is currently being offered in the way of classes for Christian Science nurses stepping into mentor positions? Or are there any plans for the near future? I don't know, Tina, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, and as Carol can perhaps share with us as well, there are mentoring topics. Mentoring is a topic that's typically included in most of the basic training and education programs. So those that come through that program have the opportunity to be introduced to those ideas. And then with regard to the continuing education elements, there are ideas that are being explored with regard to the general ethics of Christian Science nursing that certainly support those in mentoring positions and help them have the information and ideas that they need going forward. And it's certainly an idea that I would expect that we would be developing further as we go forward, where there would be some online opportunities to share ideas, and for those already involved in mentoring roles to be able to offer ideas and experience that they've had from their mentoring activities in order to support those who are moving forward into those roles. So, Carol, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, just that there have been courses designed and are available for those who are mentoring others. And it's been approached both from a standpoint of online a portion of the course being taught online, so that that portion that can be addressed online, the ethics and and ideas and examples and just working with underlying concepts for mentoring, can really be worked together as everybody's working from their individual locations. But it's also helpful to come together and work with skills and judgment and working with hypotheticals for the mentoring. And so there's two aspects that I think have been offered through the years. And as far as, I think the question was what's available, and I think, as Tina said, we'll need to be thinking about what's most available right now would be through Zoom, but certainly there are courses that are designed and available, and I think many who could certainly participate in teaching those courses and would love to also participate in taking the courses. So
Thank you. Bonnie, I think this next one is yours. When will, it's from Melanie, and I'm probably going to not say this last name right. Pilonieta, something, is that correct? When will continuing education become a requirement of maintaining a listing in the journal? You're on mute.
Oh, I was on mute on purpose. No, good question. It's something that since the beginning of the effort, really last year when we met together at Cedars, the education committee met together to discuss this issue. And also during the last couple of years, as I've been more aware of what the actual needs are in the field, I have been working towards coming up with how the Mother Church can require and or at least express to those who are journalisted how important we think this is. It's not, one of the things that was such a wonderful approach from my fellow Christian Science nurses at Cedars last year was really reflected in Tina and Carol's comments today about the basis of love that is that is underneath this concept and this idea. This is being offered from the basis of love, for supporting a practice, and it's also, as Carol pointed out really well, that this is a collective ministry. It is an individual ministry, but it's a collective ministry because it represents our church, and as we explored together, it maintains the dignity and defense of our cause. So anyone that is serving as a Christian Science nurse who has chosen to make this their life work, it is going to welcome and embrace these opportunities to strengthen and confirm their work. I can't imagine that they wouldn't just be so grateful for this gift that is being offered to them. So one way that I thought I would present this, and I did talk to the Christian Science Board of Directors and trustees about this idea to see how they wanted to approach it. And my suggestion was to have conversations with individual Christian Science nurses as their listing comes up for relisting each year, and just sort of get a list of names 6 weeks in advance of that invoice going out from the Mother Church, to be able to have a conversation with individuals and say, how have you been strengthening your practice? What are some ways that what have you learned this year? Is there an area that you feel you need some strengthening? So it's all being done from a standpoint of love and support and encouragement. So it's going to start, as a matter of fact, I asked my assistant to provide me with a list of those who are going to receive their invoices for, I think December. We're going to start with December and then January. All these things start start way ahead, so I have to start ahead too. So this has been a goal of the last year. We had to wait until we had something that we could be sure was going to be consistent and dependable and out there for people to take. So it's all worked together, and I'm so grateful to see this development. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I know everybody was very interested in your announcement and wanting to hear about that. So we do have a couple more questions. I think that probably, you know, from Alistair about Albert Baker, I'm wondering if whether Albert Baker supports Christian Science nurses training worldwide. That may be a longer, or is that an easy, can one of you answer that, or should we turn that over to Alan Basher and let him answer it directly?
Actually, Alistair answered someone else's question who was asking if Albert Baker supports Christian Science nursing education worldwide. Okay. And Alistair said, yes, they do. And we're so grateful. So that is the answer. Yes, they do. And we're all so grateful for that.
And Tina, I see you answered Elizabeth about taking it on the road. So if everybody could just read that. I mean, there are already people that have gone to different facilities and on the road, right, guys? Isn't that? And then, but because of this year, that's why we went to Zoom, is my understanding. And we will be, I think, as Tina says, in the future, hopefully we'll be able to bring classes to areas that don't have a facility, as well as areas that do, but may not have people that feel that they can teach the classes. Exactly. So is there anything else that the group wants to bring up? It's 5 minutes, 1 minute till, so I think that we're going to end this. The questions, I know that it probably could be a whole nother hour of questions, but Carol is going to close for us with some comments and short readings, not really readings, citation.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you everyone for joining us today and for the support you're giving to this idea and all that you're doing for the cause of Christian Science in your work of Christian Science nursing. A call on this bylaw is really a call on the Comforter. So in representing this bylaw, we continually turn to the teachings of Christian Science to lead us in this loving expression of the Comforter that is seen in Christian Science nursing. I love that the spiritual idea of Christian Science nursing that was revealed to Mrs. Eddy continues to unfold to us as we grow in our understanding and demonstration of Christian Science. And as we do, we will continue to find our individual and collective demonstration and expression of Christian Science nursing always ascending higher. And just a benediction, first from the Bible, first from Philippians. He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. And from the Gospel of John. The Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to any one of the three panelists, or you can, the presentation, the aocsn.org, you can refer to that questions to the website, as well as this presentation will be available. It was recorded and will be available for the next 30 days, within a couple of days. I don't think it'll be up right away, but within a couple of days. If you had fellow Christian Science nurses or any staff that would like to listen to it, it will be available. Thank you again. And thank you to James.
And thank you, Kathy. Thank you all.